Hello, people of the Earth and other planets and sentient beings anywhere in the universe. This is another broadcast by Real Turkey Channel by your loving, caring presenter Atilla Yeşilada. Today, we're going to talk about the Russia Ukraine conflict, in particular, how it might affect Turkey. Now, there's an important point that I wish to reiterate. This is not about the causes or the results of the conflict or whether there will be a war, who is right, who is wrong. These are issues way beyond me. I only broadcast videos in my general area of expertise, which is Turkey, politics, economy, business, etc., as well as emerging markets, because I've been covering emerging markets from the Turkish perspective for the last 30 years. In essence, this is an answer to a hypothetical question of what would happen if Putin carries out his threat of entering Ukraine. Now, you have to remember that Turkey's strategic allies with both Russia and Ukraine, as well as being a member of the NATO. So clearly, this is a dynamic that involves Turkey. It is also unavoidable that Turkey can escape being dragged into this conflict simply because of geography. As you know, geography is destiny for nations. And this is a map of Black Sea. Obviously, at the bottom you see Turkey. On top you see Ukraine and Russia. These strafed or striped areas are Ukrainian territory either annexed by Russia, such as Crimea, or held by pro-Russian rebels, insurgents called the Donbass region. Now, Russia has piled at least 100,000 soldiers, troops at the Ukrainian border, and a lot of other military hardware, including massive artillery and tank brigades. The talk in the international circles is that Putin is determined to enter Ukraine to make sure that the country doesn't join NATO, which would pose a threat to Russian interests, and to teach Biden and Europe a lesson in the sense that the global areas of conflict cannot be resolved unless Russia is at the table. Once again, this is my humble and rather superficial reading of the recent events from the international press. I hope, obviously, needless to say, that there will be a peaceful solution to the current disagreement between Ukraine and the West against Russia. And honestly, I'm not going to make any comment whether there will be a war or who is going to win. However, I think it's realistic to simulate a scenario where there is a ground war and one where Russia may emerge victorious or is mired in a prolonged ground war against Ukrainian forces, simply because the Biden administration is on record as threatening Russia with devastating economic sanctions. Some of these may be as harsh as kicking Turkey. Yeah, Freudian slip. Our time will come, I assure you. One of the most important sanctions that's being discussed in White House policy circles is kicking Russia out of SWIFT, the international payment system, or impose sanctions on Putin himself, start searching for his presumably ill begotten wealth, presumably kept abroad, or more oligarchs closely associated with Putin and his family. No matter how you look at it, it's a very ugly situation. And let me show you the map here. I don't think it's going to be the case. But if Russia attacks Ukraine and controls the airspace, then the most feasible route to send military and humanitarian aid to Ukraine is through the Turkish Straits, Dardanelles, as well as the Bosphorus. And in fact, Just to show the flag, a small Spanish flotilla has passed through the straits and entered the Black Sea. More may come. There is a treaty called the Montreux Treaty, which essentially compels Turkey to allow all civilian vessels to travel through the straits without any impediment. However, there is a limit as to how many warships of non-estuary, non-tributary countries which can be kept in the Black Sea. In other words, if the Montreux Treaty is to be abided, United States and other NATO allies can only send a small force, naval force, to Black Sea, which would really not pose a major threat to Putin's intentions. Of course, one of the risks that Turkey is running, and it's almost unavoidable if the push comes to shove, is NATO asking for permission to send a heavier flotilla to Black Sea, potentially armed with offensive weapons to defend Ukraine, in which case Turkey will be stuck between its ever deepening economic interests between Russia and its membership in NATO. Now, this is not the only collateral damage that Turkey may suffer. Ukraine has recently become a close ally of Turkey for reasons that Mr. Erdogan wants to make new friends in the neighborhood since he has lost all the old friends like Egypt, Saudi Arabia, etc., etc. And one of Turkey's rising stars is the defense industry, which I think exceeded $3 billion of exports. Finally, Crimea has always been emotionally important to Turks simply because the Ottoman Empire kept it until the Crimean War, and the majority native population called the Crimean Tartars or Tatars are considered to be the cousins of the Turkic people. And in fact, I know a lot of Tatars in Turkey who have migrated from Ukraine, and the Turkish people feel a very close affinity to the destiny of the Tartars, as well as to our cousins in China's Uyghur province. I think it is a different name in Chinese, but these are the Uyghur people. And these kind of things affect the course of diplomatic relations. In fact, Turkey recently has signed a mutual defense agreement with Ukraine, and here there is another problem. What would happen if Ukraine called upon Turkey to come to its aid in case of a Russian invasion? Well, let's suppose, again hypothetically, Turkey abided by the clauses of that mutual defense treaty and sent small expeditionary force or lethal military aid to Ukraine. The problem is Russia is also one of the leading trading partners of Turkey. We sell them tomatoes, they sell us natural gas, nuclear reactors, and advanced weaponry like S 400 anti missile batteries. As well, they could make life very expensive for Turkey by retaliating in the Syrian dominions held by Turkish military, such as Idlib, Al Bab, Afrin, etc., etc. And most importantly, something Russia has done in the past with devastating consequences for Turkish economy, it could simply ban exports from Turkey and tell Russian citizens that they are uh, they shouldn't be visiting Turkey. I think the last time Russia tried this, it was 2015, and the annual cost to Turkish economy was then estimated at roughly $7 billion or 1% of GDP. So that's one of Turkey's dilemmas. As well, failing to aid Ukraine has costs as well, because recently Turkey and Ukraine have also become uh, rising trade partners, with Turkish exports to Ukraine rising to $5 billion per annum. That's something like 3% of Turkish exports. More importantly, Ukraine has been buying this bad boy here, called the Bayraktar TB2 armed drone. Ukraine has an unspecified number of this in its military arsenal, and according to military analysts, it has recently been used quite effectively against pro Russian insurgents in the Donbass area that I mentioned. Let me show you Donbass. This striped area above the Sea of Azov is Donbass, which has claimed independence. And Ukraine obviously claims it's Ukraine territory. So, I assume a scenario where Russia did not send ground troops to Ukraine, but staged a retaliatory airstrike, destroying Ukraine's civilian economic capacity. You know, power plants, transmission lines, major factories, etc., etc. Clearly, making up for the damage would reduce the disposable income of Ukrainians. And one of the things a country does in situations like that is to reduce imports, and Turkey will suffer in another way. Of course, the biggest economic cost, not only for Turkey, but for any energy importing country, is Russian invasion, regardless of the outcome, and Biden fulfilling his promise of levying sanctions on Russia. You may have seen that recently both oil and natural gas prices have increased, not only because of robust demand, but also because of fears that the sanctions on Russia might potentially cover the energy industry. There's another thing here. The Turkish General Director of International Energy Agency, Mr. Fatih Birol, openly accused Russia of withholding necessary natural gas supplies to Europe to blackmail them into A, activating the Nord Stream. Sorry, as you see, we're getting the first snow in our backyard, well, in Istanbul, and we're celebrating with beverages I shall not mention on this broadcast in case minors are watching. So I'm slurring a little bit. Besides, it's Sunday. So anyhow, let me just summarize this story. Economists talk too much. Fatih Birol claims Russia is withholding natural gas supplies to EU, which, you know, jacks up prices for two reasons. A, they want EU to stay on the sidelines in case Russia uh, stages a military campaign in Ukraine. Two, there is this huge underwater natural gas pipeline from Russia through other territories to Germany, which is supposed to deliver something like 40 billion cubic meters of gas. It has been completed, it's functional, but because of regulatory disputes, a German regulatory authority so far didn't allow any gas to be pumped through the pipeline. United States is urging Germany and other allies not to use the pipeline. Germany says, "Look, I mean, look at this NG price, natural gas prices. I mean, look to the left bottom of the chart. So NG per some unit is roughly $2, $2.50. It has spiked as much as $10 per unit, and now it's roughly $5. I mean, any country is going to be hurt by that kind of a price increase and a very vital raw material, which is broadly used not only in home heating and cooking, but also in industry. So Another generic risk for countries like Turkey is that if worst comes to worst, then energy prices will soar once again. Now, let's call up some figures to see how bad the situation might get for Turkey. According to January data, over the last 12 months, Turkey consumed 62 billion meters of gas, and roughly 40% of that comes from Russia. But it doesn't matter because Turkey's gas contracts are linked to the spot price of either natural gas or Brent or Ural oil. So if one goes up in a staggered manner, the NG prices go up too. Already, Turkish government claims it has foregone $150 billion worth of revenue by not passing on natural gas price increases to final users. 150 billion liras, depending on what exchange you are looking at is more than $10 billion. That's huge amount of revenue loss. Let me show you oil prices too. I mean, I also added a forecast from Forex 24 Pro, which shows Brent oil, crude oil, breaking through the $90 per barrel resistance to go to $94 or so. Now, I have seen other forecasts in Financial Times, for instance, not by Financial Times, but Financial Times quoting that forecast by analysts, which sees Brent breaching through $100 per barrel over the winter months. There is a very simple back of the envelope calculation for Turkey. If oil prices rise by $10 per barrel, Turkey's current account deficit rises by roughly $4 billion. So currently Brent at 85, let's say it goes to $100, so that's a $15 per barrel increase, would cost Turkey roughly $6 billion. Obviously, it also affects inflation, but the correlation between the international price of natural gas and Brent versus the TL price is difficult to estimate because there's a lot of tax on these items, and it's completely up to discretion of Turkish government whether they pass the increase to industry and to households. But a rough guide is, let's say, 20%. So a 20% increase on the average price of uh, NG plus oil would probably add 4 percentage points to Turkish inflation over a year. It could be as little as 2%, but could be as much as the full 4%. Now, these are the economic damages. They are quite substantial because if you watched any video by yours truly, Attila Yeşilada, I'm sure you know where I stand. I think the Turkish economy is a train wreck, as the title of one of my previous videos suggests. So, I mean, we're already in very bad shape. We really can't afford any more, slugs to the face. So economically, it's very important, devastating, but political implications are worse. One of the demands expressed by Kremlin to the West to stop a possible invasion of Ukraine is disarmament of or removal of NATO forces from Baltic countries, former member of the Soviet Socialist Republic, Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, as well as from Poland and Romania, if I believe. NATO said this is not a starter. Don't even waste your time with it. But if Putin gets his way, it's quite possible that his next demand will be to ask Turkey to remove NATO military assets from her territory. I mean, this is not a commentary on Putin's personality. This is how war is. There is no final war. If a nation wins a war, there is always the next one waiting for one reason or other. This is the sad experience Ottomans learned throughout their 600 years of history. You can never establish secure borders. There are always troublemakers right outside your borders, waiting for you to turn your back so they can attack your people and your territory and steal stuff. So, while another military campaign invade the next country. That's how it's going to probably go with Russia. And of course, if, as I've said, NATO asks Turkey for help in easing Montreux restrictions, send more warships or supply ships with humanitarian or lethal aid to Ukraine, Russia would ask Turkey not to do so and Turkey will be stuck. Either case, if there is a war, at the very least, Turkey's loyalty to Ukraine, Russia, or NATO will be questioned and there will be some amount of loss of credibility. It could be that if Putin wins, his next target in terms of expanding Russia's sphere of influence in Europe could be Turkey. And Turkey leaving NATO is an unmitigated disaster for Turkish defense, which, despite improvements in recent years, still relies largely on NATO surveillance, spying, and hardware to defend her borders. Finally, of course, a prolonged conflict and harsh sanctions on Russia, which may include the energy sector, would drive energy prices high. And I think Turkey's total energy import bill in 2021 was roughly speaking, $50 billion. So if average energy prices goes up another 10%, hey, that's $5 billion out of the pockets of Turkish citizens. War is ugly business. There are no winners in war except military contractors, and the losers are always the poor and the young men and women who fight for their countries. I hope it doesn't happen. Thank you very much for watching Real Turkey channel videos, and I really appreciate your commentaries. And I'll try to rise up to the challenge by shooting videos inspired by your questions. Thank you very much. This is Atilla Eşilada saying goodbye from snowy Istanbul.